Hi friends, I am back today, almost super. We're going to do 2 chapters today because the first one's pretty short. So chapter 13 is the first, and then I will also read 14 because 13 is a little shorter, so we can do both. Okay, chapter 13 is called It's Been a Rough Week. Oh, I know the feeling. All right, let's go. I was missing something. I almost wanted to believe Juanita, even though her claim was outrageous. But I was missing something. I could feel it. Juanita walked over and pressed the elevator button. The door opened and we walked inside. Juanita pushed floor 72. Where are we going now? Benny asked. I'm going to show you the second thing, Juanita said. I'm going to prove to you that I'm telling the truth, and then I want to be left alone. I looked at Juanita in the reflection of the elevator doors. She looked at the floor. I thought about what she'd said about her mother. I wanted to ask her about the accident, but part of me wanted to pretend that superheroes never got hurt. In the end, I decided if Juanita ever wanted to tell me, I'd listen. The doors opened, and Juanita led us down a long, narrow corridor, pausing a couple of times as if she heard a sound. There were doors on either side of the hall, and Juanita opened the third one on the left and ushered us into a room that looked like the computer lab at school. What is this? I asked. What does it look like? Juanita said. Then she looked over at me. Our eyes met, and I think for the first time I saw the real Juanita, a tired girl who had feelings and fears and was in over her head. I'm sorry, she said. It's been a rough week. I understand, I said. Us too. Juanita sat down at a computer and opened several browser windows. She entered some usernames and passwords, logging into several different systems, and then stood up. There you go, Juanita said. I've given you access to our entire system. You have emails, calendar items, files, everything. I didn't quite know what to do. Benny coughed behind me. It didn't feel right to just start snooping around in their personal files. I'm not going to let you just do anything, Juanita said, but if you look through all our files, you'll see we have no plans for doing anything wrong. You'll see that all our communication is about how to stop the villains, you guys. There's over 500 gigabytes of information. We know we couldn't fake that. I sat at the computer and started clicking. Benny eventually sat down at another computer and opened an online game. At first, I looked through the files. As far as I could tell, there weren't any blueprints for death rays or plans for world domination. There was quite a collection of music, and I noticed that the Johnson family seemed to like the classics, Mozart, Stravinsky, Vivaldi. There were also a lot of pictures, birthdays, family reunions. I found a map of the city where they'd made guesses about our headquarters location. I was pleased to see they weren't even close. I opened the browser where Juanita had logged into the email system. I don't want to go reading through people's personal emails, I said. That doesn't feel right. I thought I saw the hint of a smile on Juanita's face. I'm glad to hear that, Juanita said. Here. Juanita took the keyboard and typed in a few commands. This is the email account we use for all of our official superhero communication. To the mayor, the city council, that sort of thing. There's nothing personal. The emails proved much more interesting. I got lost in scrolling through them. There were messages to the mayor asking for support in fighting the villains. There were proposals to the chief of police, the governor, and anybody else who would listen, proposing ways to capture and imprison the supervillains once and for all. But that wasn't the most interesting part. What is an armistice? Benny asked, reading over my shoulder. Is that one of those things you can attach to your arm so that you can hit harder? Juanita shook her head. Armistice means to stop fighting. I pointed to the screen. I'm seeing 5 emails by a guy named Oscar Redding. Last summer, he wrote to your family several times asking for an armistice. He wanted both families to sit down and talk. Your family said they wouldn't agree to anything until our family agreed. I wonder if he ever wrote to us. The name sounds familiar, Juanita said. She took the keyboard from me again. With a few quick keystrokes, she had a new window up. Looks like he's in the Chamber of Commerce. He owns several businesses in town. Ah, he also owns the thermal underwear factory. Or rather, owned it. We destroyed it last year, remember? Yeah, I said. That makes sense, Benny said. We destroyed his factory, so he wants us to stop fighting. My phone buzzed. I read the screen. Dinner in an hour. Don't be late. Your father has a surprise. Mom. I didn't want a surprise. I wanted answers. All right, so that's the end of chapter 13. Now we're going to do chapter 14. Now remember, this trivia question is going to come from either chapter 13 or 14, so make sure that you read or listen to them together. Okay, chapter 14. That's not a surprise, that's a kick in the teeth. Juanita led us back to the street, and Benny and I rode the bus home in silence. I felt like I had all the pieces to a puzzle, but I couldn't get them to fit. By the time I got off the bus, I was as confused as ever. That night at dinner, Dad hinted twice at the surprise. Our super suits? Benny's eyes were hungry. Are our super suits down in the root cellar? Said Dad, making a mocking, scolding motion with his finger. No questions until after dinner. Benny ate with gusto, shoveling food into his mouth like it was a race. After dinner, Rodney stayed upstairs to clear the table and do the dishes. Dad and Mom led Benny and me down to the main room of the root cellar. Dad leaned against a work table and tried a little too hard to look casual. Mom sat in a chair and smiled, but she looked nervous, like she was about to put on a big show. Clearing his throat, Dad said, "As you boys know, this family has a wide variety of superpowers, and those superpowers are used for different purposes." Benny raised his hand, but Dad ignored him. I could tell he'd planned out this speech and would keep on talking until he was finished. Many of the family's superpowers are quite useful during battles, but other powers work better in the special ops missions, like Great Uncle Pete over in Oak City. He can shrink to roughly the size of a taco. When we need somebody to sneak into small places, he's our man. Dad clasped his hands behind his back. Other powers, like your brother Rodney's, for example, are much better suited for background work. Rodney is an important member of our team, even though he almost never gets to go to battles. But he still gets to go every once in a while, Benny said, choosing his words carefully, and he still has a super suit. Dad looked at Mom as if asking for help. Mom said nothing. Finally, Dad looked back to Benny. Your mother and I have had a long talk, and we've discussed it with a few other members in the family. I think for right now, it's better to have you boys stay away from the battles, where it's safe. Benny smiled and nodded. I think I was as surprised as Dad and Mom. Then I saw Benny's eyes grow wide. Wait, he cried. You mean we never get to go to a battle? Well, Dad said, I don't know if you'll never get to go to a battle, but for now, it's just not. Benny was out of his chair in a flash. That's not fair. Desperate, he looked in my direction. Rafter, tell them. The battles aren't even dangerous. The Johnsons aren't trying to kill us. They think they are superheroes too. Now wasn't the best time to try to explain anything to my parents, but I couldn't leave my brother out to dry. He's right, I said. Dad, you told me on patrol that I should find out for myself. I don't know all the answers yet, but something isn't right. I think we should try to sit down and talk with the Johnsons. Dad rubbed the sides of his head with the tip of his fingers. Dear, can you help me out here? Mom finally spoke. The other thing to remember, Benny dear, is that you are both due for a growth spurt. We wouldn't want to get you a super suit and then have you grow right out of it. Growth spurt, Benny said, almost shouting. I don't get a super suit because I'm due for a growth spurt. We've come up with another way you can help this family, Dad said, and this is the big surprise. Benny folded his arms tightly across his chest and glared at Dad. I hoped for Benny's sake that Dad had come up with a suitable replacement for not getting suits. When we go on the special ops missions, Dad said, we usually drive in a big van. There's plenty of room in there, and the team usually does some last-minute prep work on the ride to the location. You know, check their gear, do a few stretching exercises, things like that. You don't want to pull a hamstring in the middle of a special ops mission, Mom said, nodding at Benny and me. Dad continued, but whoever is driving can't prep. Sometimes they show up and the whole team has to wait while they double check their gear. So your mother and I have decided that you boys can become experts at all the motor pool vehicles. When you're old enough to drive, you can prove yourselves very valuable by... That's the surprise? Benny asked, his eyes bugging out. We get to work in the motor pool? Their motor pool is a very fun place, Mom said. Benny's mouth hung open. That's not a surprise. That's a kick in the teeth. I can't even drive for 4 more years. In the meantime, Dad said, you'll start by learning the different machines, keeping them maintained and cleaned, checking the oil and tire pressure, things like that. For the past 3 years, I'd had a mental image of what I'd look like as a superhero. I'd imagined what my supersuit would look like. I'd imagined the heroic things I'd do, and now that mental image was replaced with a new image. I could see it as clear as the cowlick on the top of Dad's head. Me in overalls, grease covering my hands and face. I had a wrench in my hand, and I was working on Uncle Chambers' Datsun. Our family had really boring cars. We had 2 so that we could fit in. And now I got to work on these really boring cars. Rafter Bailey, mechanic to the superheroes. So we're supposed to wash cars and change oil until we're old enough to drive, Benny said. And then we'll drive everybody to the really cool missions and just wait in the car. I could tell Benny was close to crying. Maybe when we finally do get our super suits after our growth spurts, they will come with cute little chauffeur hats. Dad's voice became firm. Your cousin Dirk is in charge of the family motor pool up at Grandpa's Ranch. Starting tomorrow, both of you boys will report there after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, plus every other Saturday. You'll learn about all the vehicles this family owns and anything else Dirk asks you to do. This isn't a request. This is your duty as superheroes. This is how you'll help us fight the Johnsons. Dad finished his speech with a shake of the fist. Benny's voice sounded weak. The battles aren't even dangerous, he pleaded. I'm sorry, son. I knew Dad meant it. Benny fled the room. Dad and Mom looked at me. If they told me this a week ago, I would have felt exactly like Benny, angry, frustrated, and disappointed. But my understanding of the world had been turned upside down. Something else was going on, something that was more important than battles. I'll talk to him, I said. I found my brother on his bed, face down in his pillow. Benny, I said. This is our chance, his voice was muffled. It's finally our chance to be real superheroes. You're already a hero, I said. What do you mean? He asked. I couldn't help but smile. Aren't you the one who was going to stand up to a super in the school library with nothing more than a jack-in-the-box belly button? Benny didn't move. Do you believe Juanita? I asked, or do you think she's lying? Benny rolled over. I don't know. It seems like she's telling the truth. What do you think? I think I'm missing something, I said. Something obvious. If she is telling the truth and our family stopped fighting, I finally understood. Then you'll never get to go to a battle. Benny nodded. Why don't you drop and give me 50, I said. Benny snorted. I can only do 16, he said. Then drop and give me 16, I said, smiling. Benny sat up on the bed, his head hanging. I didn't have to imagine my brother's disappointment because I felt the same way. Benny pushed himself off the bed and knelt on the floor. He stared at the carpet for a few moments, then raised his head to look at me. One way or another, I'm going to get my super suit, he said. And when I do, I'm going to challenge Grandpa to a push-up contest, and I'm going to beat him. I watched Benny do his push-ups and moved the pieces to the puzzle around in my head. All right, so that's the end of chapters 13 and 14. Remember, the trivia question that you guys will get will come from one of the chapters, all right? All right, see you guys next time.